It was a supermarket in Sendai at 20 to 9 at night, the hour when they put the half-price stickers on, and Rita Katagiri had gone in for a bottle of water because his driver had stopped at the wrong lights and he had not wanted to sit in the car. That is the entire reason. There is no more to it than that. He was at the end of the aisle when he heard a voice at the checkout that his body recognized before his mind did, and he turned around. She was at the register with 2 children. She was counting coins. Not paying, counting. She had a small purse open on the belt and she was going through it with 2 fingers, and the cashier was waiting with that particular patient face. And there was a queue of 3 people behind her doing the thing where everybody looks somewhere else. "Take off the strawberries," she said quietly in Japanese. "And the yogurt. Keep the milk." One of the children, a little girl, 5, maybe 6, said, "But you said, 'Next week, Babaria,' and the child said, 'Okay,' immediately, without a single word of complaint, in the way that a child says okay when she has said okay to that sentence a great many times before. And that was the thing that took Rita Katagiri's legs out from under him. Not the coins. The okay. He knew that woman. Sanyu Nakato had been his wife for 3 years and 8 months, and their divorce had been final for 6 years and 2 months. And he had not laid eyes on her since a corridor outside a family court in Tokyo, and he was paying her 600,000 yen a month. He had been paying it since the month the divorce concluded. He had set it up himself. 15 years. Indexed, administered by the family office, a figure his own lawyer had described at the time as excessive to the point of eccentricity. He had signed it and never thought about it again, in the way that you do not think about a thing you have arranged and delegated. 72 million yen over 6 years. And she was standing at a checkout in Sendai deciding between strawberries and milk. Then the other child turned around. The boy was the same age as the girl, obviously, because they were twins, you could see it. They had that quality twins have of being one thing in 2 places. And he had a bag of rice in his arms that was too heavy for him, and he turned around to see what his mother was doing, and Rita Katagiri looked at his own father's face. Not similar. Not a resemblance. The specific set of the eyes and the specific shape of the jaw that Katagiri sure had passed to exactly one of his 3 children, and that had skipped everyone else, and that Rita had spent his whole adult life seeing in the mirror and disliking. He did not go over. People ask about that, and he has said, with some accuracy, that a man who has just done that arithmetic in the space of 11 seconds is in no condition to walk up to anybody. He stood at the end of an aisle in a supermarket in Sendai and watched his ex-wife pack a bag of shopping with 2 children he had never met. And then he watched all 3 of them walk out into the car park. And then he went and sat in a car for 40 minutes without saying a word to his driver. The one thing he did do was follow them as far as the automatic doors, and stop there, and watch which way they turned, and then feel so thoroughly disgusted with himself for it, that he went back inside and bought the strawberries and the yogurt, and left them on the counter, which made no sense at all, and which the cashier remembers to this day. His driver, who had been with him for 9 years, asked once whether everything was all right, and did not ask again. They had married when she was 24, and he was 31. She had come to Japan at 19 from Kampala on a scholarship and stayed, and was working in a hotel in Tokyo doing guest relations because her Japanese was better than that of most of the people employing her. He had met her because of a booking dispute involving 11 rooms, which she had resolved in his favor and then charged him for correctly, which nobody in 11 years had done. The first 2 years were good. She has never denied that. The 3rd year, a man came to the house. Nothing happened. That is important. He stood at the gate at 6:30 in the evening and said something to her that was not a threat in any way a police officer could have written down. And then he left. Rita had it dealt with within a day, in a manner she was not told about. But she had spent 2 years being told, in 100 small ways, that his world and their house were separate things, and she had believed it because she wanted to, and a man had stood at her gate at 6:30 and made that permanently untrue. She asked him to leave it. He said he could not. She asked what she was supposed to do with that, and he did not have an answer, and she filed 11 weeks later. He did not contest it. He has said more than once that not contesting that divorce was the only decent thing he has ever done quickly. What he did instead was set up the settlement, an amount calculated on what he would have wanted her to have if he had died, which is a strange way to calculate maintenance and tells you something. And he handed the administration to the family office, which meant, in practice, to his father's sister. Sadako Katagiri was 68, and she ran the household side of that family the way her brother had run the other side, which is to say completely. Here is what she had done. The first payment went out in the month after the divorce, to the account on file, which Sanyu had closed a week earlier when she moved out of Tokyo. The transfer bounced. Standard, what happens next in a normal family is that somebody rings the recipient and asks for the new details. What happened instead was that Sadako Katagiri looked at a bounced transfer of 600,000 yen to a Ugandan woman who had walked out of her nephew's marriage and decided, at that moment, in her own words, to let it rest. For 6 years, every month, the payment was raised, recorded and processed, and every month it was returned or redirected, and the money went into a family account, and the reconciliation report went across a desk with a note on it that said the matter was in hand. It took him 72 hours to find all of this, and he did it himself. At night, with 2 accountants, and no explanation offered to anybody. The first thing he pulled was the transfer history, and the first thing he noticed was that it looked immaculate. 72 consecutive months. Correct amount. Correct date. Correct reference. If you read the column that said issued, the arrangement had worked perfectly for 6 years. It was the second column that was wrong, and nobody had ever had a reason to read the second column, because in that family the woman who prepared the report was the woman who reviewed it. At 2 a.m. on the second night, one of the accountants said, carefully, that he did not wish to state the obvious, but that a return transfer generates an automatic notification, and that 6 years of notifications had gone somewhere, and that somebody had been reading them. And Sanyu Nakato found out she was pregnant 3 weeks after the divorce was final. She wrote to him. She wrote 31 times over 4 years. She rang the office 11 times. She wrote to the lawyer twice, and when the twins were 4 months old, she got on a train with 2 babies and went to the gate of the Katagiri house in Bunkiku in November and asked to see her ex-husband. His aunt came out. His aunt did not shout and did not insult her and offered her tea, which she declined. What his aunt said, standing in a driveway with a pram and a woman she had never intended to know, was this, that Rita had made his position perfectly clear, that a paternity claim would be contested and that the family would spend whatever it took, that a foreign woman with no residency history of her own, no property, no employment at that moment, and 2 infants, would find the Japanese family court system extremely educational, and that, if she pressed it, the family would seek the children. Every part of that was a lie, except the last part, which was not exactly a lie because it was a description of what could happen rather than what would. Sanyu Nakato was 26 years old, 4 months postpartum, alone in a country 6,000 miles from her mother, and she believed it. Of course she believed it. It was entirely credible. She got on the train and went back to Sendai, and did not write again. The letters were not destroyed. That is the part that Rita has said he cannot get past. He had assumed, in the 72 hours it took to reconstruct all of this, that they had been burned. They had not. There were 31 of them in a lacquer box in a cupboard in his aunt's room, in order, opened, and one of them contained a hospital photograph of 2 babies in a single cot, taken at 2 days old, with their names written on the back in ballpoint. Waswa, Babiryai. In the Buganda tradition, twins are given fixed names. The firstborn boy is Waswa, and the second-born girl is Babiryai. Their mother becomes Nalongo, mother of twins, and it becomes her name, permanently, in the way an honor does. Their father becomes Salongo. He read the back of that photograph in his aunt's room at 2 a.m. and understood that he had been Salongo for 5.5 years, and that 6,000 miles away a woman in Kampala had been telling her neighbors about her grandchildren for exactly that long. He went to see his aunt at 7 the next morning. He has never repeated most of that conversation. The only part he has quoted is her answer when he asked her, and he says he asked it genuinely, wanting to understand why she had not simply told him. Sadako Katagiri said, "Because you would have gone to Sendai." She was not ashamed. She has never been ashamed. She is, a woman who was raised inside that family in the 1960s, and who believed, entirely, sincerely, that she had spent 6 years protecting a bloodline, a succession and a nephew who was not thinking clearly, and who considers the whole business to have been a service performed at some personal cost. She said all of that calmly, sitting up straight at 7 a.m, and she has not altered her account since. She lives in Shizuoka now, in a good house, with everything she needs, and no involvement in anything whatsoever. He pays for it. He has not spoken to her in 4 years. Both of those facts are, in his view, the same decision. He did not turn up at Sanyu's door. He sent a lawyer. Hers, not his. He paid the retainer of a firm in Sendai that she selected from a list of 5 and instructed with no involvement from him at all. And the lawyer delivered a folder and a letter, and the letter said, in substance, this is what was arranged, this is what happened to it. This is the person who did it and what she has admitted. Here is the money, and here is what it should have earned. None of it is conditional on anything, and you never have to see me. The figure, with interest and the shortfall calculated properly, was a little over 89 million yen. Sanyu Nakato read the folder over 4 days, and then asked her lawyer to arrange a meeting in the lawyer's office, with the lawyer present, which is exactly how it should have been done, and exactly how it was done. She has described that meeting as the angriest she has ever been in a room while sitting still. Because the money was, in a sense, the least of it. She had built 6 years. She had worked at a bakery, then at a distribution center. Then in the office of the distribution center, she had done a bookkeeping qualification at night. She had raised 2 children who were healthy and funny and slightly too clever. She had done all of it on approximately nothing, in a small flat. And she was proud of it in a way that she was not willing to have taken away by a folder. What she said to him, and he has quoted this, because he says it is the most accurate description of the situation anyone produced, was, "You did not abandon us. That is worse. If you had abandoned us, I would have known what you were. Instead, I spent 6 years believing a version of you that your aunt wrote, and I taught it to my children, and now I have to go home and unteach it, and that is the bill. Rita, not the money." That, he did not defend himself. He said she was right. and that the money was hers regardless. And then he asked one question, which was whether he could meet them. And she said, "Not yet, and possibly not for a long time, and if it happens on paper and on my terms." It took 14 months. The paper was real. She had a lawyer draft it, and he signed it without amendment, a schedule of contact she controlled entirely, subject to cancellation by her at any time for any reason or none, with no counter-obligation whatsoever, and a clause, her idea, insisted on, non-negotiable, that any attempt by any member of the Katagiri family to seek any form of custody at any point, in any court, would trigger the immediate and permanent forfeiture of the trust he had by then set up for the twins' education. She wanted the family's own money on her side of the table. The first meeting was in a park in Sendai for 50 minutes, with her present the entire time. The twins were told, beforehand, in the plainest terms she could manage, and she has said that the hardest sentence she has ever spoken in her life was, "He did not know about you." Somebody stopped him from finding out. Waswa, aged 6, asked whether the person who stopped him was going to be in trouble. That is a question a great many adults would like a simple answer to. That was 4 years ago. Raita Katagiri is 44 now. He handed the organization over in the second year, not because of the twins. He is very careful about this, but because his aunt's answer at 7 in the morning had shown him something about the shape of the thing he was running and what it does to the people standing near it. And because it turns out that a man who spends 14 months waiting for permission to meet his own children has a great deal of time to think. He runs 2 construction supply businesses now. He is in Sendai on the first and third weekend of every month. He is not married to their mother, and there is no indication that this is going to change, and he has stopped answering that question. Sanyu Nakato is 36. She is a section head. She bought the flat. She did not, in the end, take all of the 89 million. She took the arrears in full, because they were owed, and she is not sentimental about arrears, and she directed the rest into the children's trust, and told him to stop looking at her like that. And in the third year, on a video call to Kampala, her mother, who had been told the entire story in installments over 6 years, and had formed some extremely firm opinions, spoke to Raita Katagiri for the first time, at length, in Luganda, translated in real time by a woman who was clearly cleaning it up considerably as she went. At the end of it, the old lady said one word that needed no translation. She called him Salongo. He has said that he sat there afterward and could not speak, because it was the first time in 5.5 years that anyone had told him what he was, and because it had come, of all the people on earth, from the one who had the most right to withhold it.